back to another podcast. I am Aaron. This is my better half, Patience. And today we're going to be talking through the second half of our story. We've been married for just over 2 years at this point, and it has been a very interesting ride, to say the least. And we've had a lot of growing that, the Lord has done in our lives, a lot of immaturity that we've kind of come out of. And so we are going to be sharing that story with y'all, hopefully so that it can help even just one person listening to this. And then from there, we'll spend the rest of these podcast episodes from here on out kind of pulling apart specific seasons and the different lessons that we've learned and, the different beliefs that we've developed to hopefully help at least one person listening to this podcast either come out of a difficult time in their relationship or to build a new pillar in their marriage or their relationship
for future relationships,
or prepare for future relationships as well. And so, and ultimately our job here is to help more couples glorify God in their relationships and to grow and to remove sin by the grace of God. So that they stop hurting each other. So we'll be picking up where we left off on our last episode, which is when we got married.
Yeah, and if you haven't noticed, if you're watching, we are in different outfits because that podcast episode took quite a while to film.
It did take quite a while, yes.
Because we just have a big, long, full story. So.
Yes, we do indeed, 100%.
So we're picking up the next day.
Yep. Yeah. And on top of this as well, our mission by the end of this podcast, season 1, is to have a name for it. So again, if you have any ideas, let us know. You'll probably, honestly, I don't know, maybe we'll have the name decided by the time that we launch this because we've already filmed a number of episodes. And so who knows, maybe by the time it's launched, we'll have a name and you guys will just hear us be talking about yeah, we need to get a name figured out.
And we have a name.
And we have a name already. Yeah. So anyway, let's go ahead and pick right up from where we left off. So we got married. Mm-hmm. It was a very fun wedding. Yeah. It was a great time. We enjoyed it and all.
Yeah. Thank you again, parents.
Thank you again, parents.
Fantastic wedding.
And honestly, everyone who attended, it was a really good time. And the caveat to that, though, being that as fun as the wedding day was, it was the beginning of a very, very bumpy journey. Mm-hmm. So as early as our honeymoon.
Yes.
So let's go ahead and start there. So obviously, we have our wedding day, we leave our wedding day, we go off on our honeymoon.
Yeah.
And these problems that we talked about in the last episode, breaches of trust, selfishness, lack of empathy, lack of boundaries,
lack of emotional intelligence,
and awareness, these things came up and became really difficult. And so obviously we were just married. Yeah. So sex was something that we were, looking to figure out how to do. But unfortunately, without, going too deep into the details, was not something that was working out very well. And a big part of that being just due to the emotional problems that we had, the breaches of trust, things like that. Yeah. I distinctly remember in our honeymoon, we're out at this, all-inclusive Hard Rock resort in Mexico that we got on a really big discount. Yeah. And we're there and I remember all right, I want to connect with each other or whatever. But I don't even remember what the exact conflict was. Maybe you do, but
I can't quite remember either. But I know I think it had something to do with I said we had scheduled a time to be together, to be very intentional with each other, I think. And I ended up going back on that and saying I didn't really feel like it and I didn't really want to do it.
And I just remember going out to the balcony.
Yeah, I remember the balcony. I just remember the emotions we were having out there.
Yeah.
And I think, again, I can't quite remember the conflict, but I know that it had to do with me breaking your trust, me going back on my word, and me thinking only of myself, I think.
And at that point, it was kind of crap.
The problems are still there.
They're still there.
Yeah.
And there's no going back.
Yeah.
And if anything, it has this compounded level of because there is no backing out, it's is this what the rest of my life will look like? Yeah. And this is, again, a couple of days after we got married that we're having these issues. Yeah. So, we go through a honeymoon, and it's this, and when we wanted to do like a nice honeymoon, again, thinking that having a nice honeymoon would kick off our relationship in the right way,
Yeah.
and everything would be better because of it.
Yeah.
But in reality, even though on Facebook, everyone sees the pictures of us having a great time, we're crying.
It was like putting nice fresh paint over a pile of mud. You
Yeah.
know? Like it just didn't, it wasn't that great.
Yeah.
And I think there were amazing parts of it. I think we did have a great time together at times, and the food was good, and
Yeah.
the views were good, but we were still struggling with all those emotional conflicts that were not getting resolved.
And as time progressed and the weeks and the months went by, our relationship started getting into a place of like, how do we even connect with each other? Similar to our friendship, right? All these problems that kind of reared their ugly heads, but only became worse.
Yeah.
Because again, we're two very different people with different ways of thinking,
Yeah.
different communication styles,
Yeah.
different ways of handling conflict, coming together. And we both wanted to make it work, but there was these constant problems going on. And another thing as well is we were actually also still doing marriage counseling, and it was not working. And we get around to, in Charlotte, North Carolina, somehow a conversation came up of, do you even love me? And what was your answer at the time?
And my answer, before I even say it, I want to clarify that I'm a very rational, detail-oriented person. I'm very practical in how I think about things. So I kept looking at our marriage and how I kept betraying Aaron. I kept engaging in sinful thoughts and mindsets and focusing only on myself. So I was looking at all of this stuff, and I kept hurting you, and I kept, breaking promises to you. So I was looking at all of this stuff, and I was like, well, if I look at these actions, then no, I don't love you. And
Because my actions don't say I love you, therefore I don't love you.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Whereas for me, I was looking for a sense of validation of, well, even though your actions might not say it, does your heart say it?
Yeah.
And if I can know that your heart still loves me, then we can work through the actions part.
Yeah.
But from your perspective, when you hear that question, you're thinking, well, because my actions don't say it, my heart must not love you.
Yeah.
And so when I ask the question, I'm asking one thing,
Yeah.
but you're receiving something different.
Yeah.
And so your response to that was soul crushing. You said, no,
Yeah.
no, I don't love you. We are 5 months married on a trip in Charlotte, a vacation in Charlotte. And my wife tells me in the hotel room, I don't love you. I'm gutted. And that was kind of the moment where it's like, man, I feel like most people, when they talk about, the first year of marriage is the hardest or whatever, I feel like there's two groups of people. You have the people who say that the first year of marriage is the honeymoon phase and everything's great. And then you have the group of people that say the first year of marriage is the hardest. But when they talk about that, they're talking about you leave your socks on the floor, you leave your dirty laundry out, or man, you don't do the dishes, or you stink, right? Like those are the issues they're talking about.
Well, I do think that if people are saying the first year of marriage is the hardest, I think there is a group of people that probably have gone through the things we've gone
Precisely.
through, but nobody talks about it.
But we don't talk about it.
Yeah, because it's such a horrible thing to say, my marriage, I just got married, the first year of marriage has been horrible, and we're struggling so much. So nobody talks about it. So we didn't talk about it. We didn't seek help or counsel.
So we didn't know how. We felt so alone.
We felt
in
so
that
alone,
process.
which is a huge part of us starting this podcast.
Precisely.
Is to bring light to those issues, to tell you guys about our story and show you guys the redemption that can happen through it.
100%.
So
there is a good part.
Yeah,
it's coming
it's
soon.
coming.
All right. So, but yeah, this is like a really, really dark time. Right. And in that moment in the hotel room, I'm like I felt so alone. I felt like no one understood that world. How do you deal with that? 5 months married and your wife tells you she doesn't love you. But again, on your side, your side, your heart
I'm
loved
like, I
me.
do love you. I
You
didn't want to
did love
lose
me,
you.
but you didn't know how to say that because you didn't
Yeah.
understand the question I said. And we thought, yeah, well, like our problems are because we have breaches of trust. Our problems are because we have like major issues in our relationship.
Yeah.
Well, it's not because of communication. It was totally because of communication. Right.
Most of it.
And when we look back at that,
Yeah.
it's like, okay, like, yeah, like their communication, I'd say was like, really at the core of it, it's sin. Sin was the heart, the root of all of these issues
Yeah.
of both of us being fallen human beings with different expectations coming together, focusing on ourselves. And so like on my end, I, was focusing on like I came in with this expectation of this dream marriage. So I grew up listening to country music, right? And it may not have been Disney princesses with their Prince Charming, but it was like Disney princesses with their Prince Charming for guys.
Yeah.
Grew up in the South,
Yeah.
right? Is that country music. You're hearing all about like, that ideal lady.
The girl in
and,
the sundress.
the girl in the
thing, I don't
sundress,
know.
and it's like, it's an idyllic relationship.
Yeah.
And like, it's either that or it's like,
I lost her.
it's like, or I ran my keys in the side
Yeah,
of his,
yeah.
car, right?
Yeah.
And so like my picture that's what I grew up with. That's what I always wanted. I was always a romantic. And so like I wanted that ideal relationship. When I got married, that's what I expected.
Yeah.
And then I have this.
Yeah.
And so it was really difficult for me, but I was holding on. I was holding on to that ideal, that picture. And we'll talk about this in another podcast episode of I was having an affair with my ideal imaginary wife that I didn't have. And it prevented me from just receiving you for who you were, not trying to change you, but laying my life down for you. Flaws, good things, everything in between. I wasn't laying my life down in love and service for you. It was just problems. And I had so much pain caked on top that I couldn't see the good. And CD and Melody Fabian, highly recommend them. They have a podcast called Hanging with the Fabians. Check them out. They talked about this at the Weekend to Remember conference that we were just at like last weekend. That's sponsored by Family Life. This podcast is not sponsored by Family Life, but Family Life, if you'd like to sponsor us, hit us up. But anyway, they talked about like a lot of times in marriage, we have these like pain glasses that tint and color our view and we can't see the good.
Yeah.
And that was me. Like I couldn't see the good. And so like I would try to think of like, well, what's one good thing about my wife? And I would just sit there and I'd be like, I can't think of anything good about my wife.
Yeah.
And it was heart-wrenching to say, to admit that, right? It was like, we're recently married. I wanted to be the husband who would just brag about my wife all the time, but I had nothing to brag about. I was like, my wife hurts me.
Yeah.
My wife breaks my trust, right? And because of that, because I was so caught up in that pain and because I was hanging on to what I wanted marriage to look like rather than simply accepting and receiving who I had in front of me, who God had given me and laying my life down, which was my God-given role and duty in that relationship was to lay my life down and serve and love her. I didn't do that. And because of that, it only exacerbated the pain and made it worse and perpetuated those problems. Now, this is not to say that if you were in an abusive relationship that you shouldn't do anything about it. You shouldn't bring it up. You shouldn't communicate through it. The reason why we're here today is because Patience and I communicated through our problems and we didn't give up and we sought help from outside sources. We sought the Lord and we tried to work through it. So I'm not saying that, if you're in a relationship where there is some kind of abuse, verbal, physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, that you should just sweep it under the rug. You should seek help. You should seek the Lord, and definitely do not stay in a situation where you are being abused. So I just want to make that quick side note, not to take that the wrong way. But it was definitely a tough relationship, and I was not laying my life down as I should. So that was like kind of on my end. Okay, like I kind of hit rock bottom, and I didn't know what to do. I felt so alone.
I think feeling alone was one of the biggest things for me, and I didn't feel like I could tell anyone about what was going on in a marriage. I felt misunderstood by counselors,
Mm-hmm.
the counselors we sought.
Mm.
I felt there was no one I could turn to. I couldn't turn to my husband because my husband was in so much pain. I didn't feel like you could receive the hurt that I was feeling when you already had so much of your own hurt.
Mm.
And I felt misunderstood by marriage counselors. We had moved away from all of our close friends.
It got to a point where, again, as the months progressed and it was death by a thousand cuts, there were more things, one after the other. I felt like, if we had a conflict, another thing that happened is, I'm the type of person like, just based on, I've been this way my entire life. I've kind of developed this way of handling conflict just from my upbringing is like, if there's a situation, you handle it. Like I want to address it right there. I don't want to leave anything because I feel unsafe.
Yeah.
If there's something under the surface that's not being addressed, if
Yes.
you're upset, if you're not doing well, and it's not cleared up immediately, I feel unsafe. So I was a pursuer when we faced conflict. I wanted to address it immediately.
Yeah. And then I am a distancer. So when I have conflict, not only do I run away from it, I shut down completely. At the time, anyway, this is very much improved. But this was a huge reason that our marriage was struggling so much is because we couldn't get through our conflicts because we had two different ways of handling them. So I would shut down, I would withdraw, I would stonewall, I wouldn't respond. Like I would just sit there.
And it was tough for me because I interpret that as, well, I'm the only one here that wants to work through our conflict.
Yeah.
I'm the only one that's trying.
Yeah.
And so like we have all this misunderstanding. Like I remember, sitting on the couch and just like being like, why is it that, like I'm not sitting here like yelling or anything like that. I'm trying to make it work. I'm doing everything that the marriage therapist told me to do, which probably came from like marriage therapy 101.
Yeah.
And it's not like they were, I guess they just weren't equipped to actually help us work through our issues. Because it
At
was
least
always
not those therapists. There are therapists.
yes. But it was just like it was all the basic stuff and it never actually helped us. And so I was doing all the things that these, again, very, I guess, elementary level things that the therapist told me to do.
And I don't know.
And it kind of helped.
It kind of helped. We were just in this cycle that was going over and over and over. Like we weren't getting anywhere.
Because we weren't actually able to communicate through our problems and through our conflict, it only exacerbated the problem and then
elongated the problems.
And then it reached a point where our marriage just became cold. We didn't know how to connect with one another. We would just sit there in silence and look at each other. And when we would try to find marriage therapists, because we were constantly working trying to find people to work with it through, like these marriage therapists would be like, yeah, John Gottman talks about perpetual problems. And we didn't want to get divorced, though admittedly I
think we had thought about it
we
a
were
lot.
starting to consider divorce at this point. But we didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
We wanted to find a way
it
to
was
work
like
through
an off-limits thing for us.
Yeah.
But in the back of our minds, we were like...
Both of us were like thinking about it, but we wouldn't say it.
Yes. And it was... I think also we had a rule where we were not to say divorce and not to like really bring it out and bring it up as an option.
Yeah.
But even still, in the back of our minds, we were like, how are we going to do this?
Yeah.
Like,
because every therapist we had spoken to would basically tell us like, yeah, there's no solution to this. It was like John Gottman's perpetual problems. And the way that they framed it was like, this is something that will never be fixed. It'll never go away. And we're like, what? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
So, and every single one of them are like, we can't take divorce off the table. If that's what you need to do, then that's what we'll advise you to do. It was like,
and it was even more discouraging to hear that. Like, we felt hopeless, but we didn't want to go through a divorce. That's not in accordance with our values. It's not in accordance with what we truly wanted to do.
If you are a skilled marriage therapist listening to this right now and you are like pulling your hair out, we wish we found you.
Yeah.
Like a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
So as time went on, things got cold. And if you know anything about relationships, it's not when things are heated that it's the most dangerous. It's when things are cold and the communication has died down and the connection has died down. And that's where we were at. And it reached one point where I don't remember what sparked this, but I had sat down patients at the dining room table, and I said, I feel unsafe in my own home. I don't even feel safe laying down in my bed. Not because she was like physically abusing me or anything, but because there were so many breaches of trust that it was like, I can't even trust my own partner, my own spouse, my own wife in my own house. So I don't feel safe. And at this point, you know, because we were so discouraged on the marriage therapy thing, I think it was like, like that kept getting put off. And I was like, we need to talk to marriage therapists. We need to find marriage therapists. But I didn't feel like that was being reciprocated on your side. But again, like we just had such little hope at that point that it's like, it's really not the most motivating thing to go searching out for the next marriage therapist. But we knew we needed to do something, and it just kept getting pushed off. And after one particular breach of trust, I sat her down at the dining room table and I said, I don't even feel safe in my own home, and we've talked through this, and I'm not like, it doesn't seem like anything is moving. So there are only two options that we have here. Either we take this seriously and we go to the next marriage therapist and we really give this another shot, and I need to see you trying, or I need to leave. Not divorce.
Just separate.
But to separate. I'll find another place to live for 6 months, 8 months, and just take some time away to heal so that I can come back with greater strength to be able to help us work through that. And that was probably the lowest point of our marriage when we had that conversation.
I remember thinking, this can't be happening. Like, this is not my life. This is not true. I remember thinking, if this happens, what are people going to think of us? What's going to happen to us? And for context, throughout this whole marriage, I was very stagnant. I was not trying to change. I didn't know how to change. I didn't know what needed to be changed. I was just very stuck. So I think after that conversation, that really sparked the need to change, or to pursue change. So I think at that point we had both kind of started going to individual therapy. Do you think?
Yeah. And another caveat to this is, around the same time, I had like my childhood best friend. We were friends for a really long time. And him and I had a falling out. And so that like wrecked me, because that was like a big pillar of my identity, which is super unhealthy, by the way. But that was like a big pillar of my identity. And when that came loose, like I just, like my entire life just felt like it was in shambles at that point. Mind you, I was making tons of money. I was making more money than I'd ever made in my life. Like on the surface, to social media, we were living our lives. Everything was great. But doesn't change the fact that on the inside, I felt empty, hollow, broken. I didn't know even who I was at that point. And so I went to therapy to...
Yeah, you started the therapy.
I went to therapy because, again, of that friendship that fell through. And I kind of looked back and was trying to find the roots of like what in my life caused me to respond that way, think that way, operate that way with other people, kind of find the roots and like fix those so that it would change the way that I would behave. And around the same time you start therapy.
Yeah, I think you had started it and I was like, well, I guess I can do this too. I think it was like kind of a spark, something.
We also started another marriage therapist at that time.
We did, yeah. We were doing individual therapy for both of us, and then marriage therapy. And I think I saw you going to therapy, and I heard the things that you were learning. So I was like, let me try this out too. So I started going to therapy as well. And again, like I said earlier, I didn't think that I could change. I didn't know what to do to change. I didn't know what needed to be changed. So like all of this was an unidentifiable problem for me. I'm also, again, like I mentioned earlier, a very detail-oriented person. I'm very practical. So like everything that was going on was really hard for me to define, to find a solution to, and I was really struggling. So I started going to individual therapy, and I think that at least started getting the ball rolling towards a healthier marriage.
Yeah. And so around this point, we get a camper van, and we travel up and down the East Coast with our dog. And there was
Again,
even
thinking that, being in a confined space, maybe we'd learn how to communicate better.
and we did, in some ways. But it also, again, exacerbated some of our problems, and like it affected every area of our marriage. Our emotional intimacy was bone dry. Our sex life was bone dry, and we would try to spice it up and spark things in different ways, and they all felt contrived and fake.
It
And
doesn't work if you don't have emotional connection and emotional safety with your
spiritual
spouse.
connection as
Yeah, if
well.
you don't have any type of connection with your spouse, trying to spice things up in the bedroom doesn't make sex
Yeah.
better. It doesn't
Yeah.
make it,
If anything, it made it more
Yeah.
painful
yeah,
because it was a reminder of what was going
how
on.
disconnected we were.
And at the same time, our spiritual lives were declining. We weren't attending church
Yeah.
nearly as much. We kind of started falling away, and
Yeah.
everything was obviously going downhill and fast.
Yeah.
But this is when things started to turn up.
Bottom of the
So-
barrel, you can only look up, right?
You can only look up.
Yeah, so at this point, I started going to individual therapy, like I mentioned, and I was learning so much about things that I don't think I'd ever even considered. So I was learning about my communication styles, how I handled conflict, how stonewalling and withdrawing is not healthy for communication and conflict. And I was also learning how childhood and upbringing and external factors can affect so much your beliefs and your perceptions of things. And everyone grows up learning different things, and the way that I ended up handling conflict was withdrawing and not facing my problems and running away from them and not feeling them and numbing myself. And that was in direct conflict with
how I,
yeah,
developed how I handle conflict
Yeah.
through, my upbringing and my external circumstances in life
Yeah.
that shaped, as a child, just how I operate and think.
yeah,
And they were in direct conflict with each other. I don't feel safe unless it's solved right now.
Yeah.
You didn't feel safe
I
unless
also had time to like go away and process and like
for a long
gather
time.
my thoughts and and I did not respond well to being confronted and so many different things. So I think that individual therapy just made me aware of this stuff. And just by becoming aware, like a whole world was opened up to me about how I can change, how I can solve conflict. I think awareness doesn't solve the problem, but it brings you closer to the next step.
Yeah.
And it
You
brings you
can't-
closer to action.
You can't solve a problem that you haven't even identified or defined.
Yeah.
If you're not even aware of it,
Mm-hmm.
you can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, you don't want to just become aware of it and then focus on the problem,
Yeah.
right? But by having someone who is guiding you through that process, they helped you become aware of it
Yeah.
and then helped you look at solutions to solve it so you can move forward in a healthier manner.
Yeah.
And from that point, everything
It was
changed.
crazy.
And so
Yeah.
another thing as well is we also moved. And I just want to make like a small side note because I do think this actually had a bit of an impact on it, is like our location.
Yeah.
Where we lived was it was a very cheap area, some cheap real estate.
Yeah.
And that's why we moved there
Yeah.
out of college after getting married.
We were like, affordable housing? Heck
Yeah.
yeah.
But we didn't consider just
Why?
the spiritual nature of that town. It was very dark. Like as
Yeah.
you're driving the roads, it could be a sunny day, but it just
feels gray.
gray.
Yeah.
It feels heavy spiritually. Even, in the places that you think would be bright
Yeah.
or dark. And so that definitely had a huge impact. And then the Lord called us to move out to Nashville, Tennessee.
Yeah.
And honestly, just since being here, it's felt different.
Yeah.
And so like that's a small side note, but that I definitely do think that has had an impact as well in helping us to rebuild and and heal from what we had and
Yeah.
get to a better place. It wasn't an overnight thing. This was a process that took months, many,
So
many
long,
months.
yeah.
But it started with each of us working on ourselves so that we could be better for our spouse.
Which we have a whole episode on.
Yes, and it'll be coming soon. And so we really focused on ourselves to become better for our spouse, and it changed how we communicated, changed how we operated, changed our day-to-day life.
Yeah.
We were able to connect with each other more, and because we felt safer, then we were able to actually move to the higher levels and calibers of having a really healthy and good, fruitful marriage. And so now, by the grace of God and his mercy that he showed during that time, he called us back into the church. We were, he showed us that it's not always easy, but when things are difficult, that's when you lean into the Lord the most.
Yeah.
That's when you sacrifice the most. When things are hardest is when you are most intimate with Christ, the suffering servant.
Yeah.
And so we, grew closer to the Lord. We kind of recentered ourselves on him. And then because we were focusing on making sure that we were better for each other rather than trying to change each other,
Yeah.
and by identifying and doing that homework on each of our ends to find out what was causing the problems
Yeah.
and then fixing those
Yeah.
so that we could better serve each other, all of these things created for us a healthier marriage. And then you take that, which puts you in a right direction, and you keep going in that right
Yeah.
direction for
1%.
several months,
Yeah.
1% every single day, every week. Then you get to a place where when you look at each other again, you're more than best friends.
Yeah.
You laugh together. You dance together. You go on adventures, and it's fun and bright and amazing. And then from there, when that marriage has been healed, that's when the Lord called us to share what we had learned
Yeah.
with other people.
And I want to say that there wasn't one single thing that fixed everything. It was a combination of us putting in the effort. It was a combination of us examining ourselves. It was also seeking out the Lord, seeking out guidance and counsel. Getting 1% better every day is so key. And you might not see the progress in the moment, but if I look back at our marriage a year ago, it was wildly different. It was wildly cold and unhealthy. But every day we were both putting in a little bit of effort to do better. Even if it was tweaking one thing, like tweaking one input, like just certain things. Like I think in marriage therapy and in individual therapy, like we were both learning better ways to handle conflict and to be patient with each other and to do something more healthy when I wanted to withdraw. Just tweaking little things every single day and then continuing to practice those things every single day. And it was hard and it was difficult. And a lot of those things were really unnatural.
And I think there's something to be said about that if you don't put in the work, if you don't put in the effort, the natural thing that happens is drifting apart. So think of two boats at sea. If they're not anchored, if they're not actively moving, the current will move those two boats further and further away from each other.
Yeah.
And so it takes intention and effort to really unite and to move closer to one another. If you're not growing, you're dying.
Yeah.
Right. And so that stagnation, there is no such thing. And we heard this at Weekend to Remember. There is no such thing as a static marriage.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as it's staying still, staying the same. You're maintaining. No, you're either putting in the work and intentionally growing closer and closer each and every day and putting in the stuff that feels unnatural, that doesn't feel like how you would naturally respond to conflict or issues.
Yeah.
If you're not doing that though, you are moving away.
Yeah.
Period. Bottom line. And that was what was happening with us.
Yeah.
Is we were drifting further and further and further away until it kind of got to a point where we had to have a really hard conversation with each other. And I'm not recommending anyone go out and, separate from your spouse or anything like that. But it got to a really, really dark point. It's like we didn't even feel comfortable sleeping in the same bed.
Yeah.
And so we needed to, really take that intentional action.
Yeah. I think a huge part is we weren't intentional with each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was through that intention that then we shifted the direction of our boats.
Yeah.
And then moved closer and closer and closer. And it's a process that is still happening. We're not
Absolutely.
there.
Yeah.
Right? This is a love story in the making. It is actively being written. We are simply sharing, hey, at this stage of our journey, at this stage of our story, this is what we learned to get back when we were drifting in separate directions. And so now, 5 years down the road, 20 years down the road,
It's going to be even better.
it's going to be even better.
Yeah.
And it just keeps going. There is no end destination. It's like, cool, we're there. No, it's
That's
in our
continuous,
80s,
yeah.
we're going to still be putting in the work
Yeah.
every day because we know that marriage is work. So if you're not married and you think that marriage is a breeze, hate to break it to you, pal, but it ain't. It takes active work and effort, just
I
like
think-
any other relationship.
I think I just thought of this. It takes a lot of intention and it takes a lot of self-reflection. They kind of rhyme, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I think those were,
intention,
like,
reflection.
Intention and reflection, and I think those were two key things that actually led us to a healthier marriage, which obviously there's tons of like sub points under that, but it started with intention and reflection.
Now we're at a place where, thank the Lord, by His grace, we are happily married, 2 years in, and we are in love with each other.
Yeah.
And when we got married, we knew this, and I actually said it in my speech at our wedding that we had a lot of issues in just our friendship, dating, engagement, and we kind of knew that there was going to be some of that in the future. We didn't quite know how much.
Yeah.
But we made a commitment that screw compatibility, because we are radically incompatible.
Yeah.
Screw compatibility. We are going to build a love together. We're going to build a life together.
Yeah.
And build it, we did.
Yeah.
And we are still
We're
doing
still
that.
building it. Yeah.
When we got married, we weren't at a place where we could say, I fell in love with you, right? That wasn't true. We actually, our song that we had our first dance to was, we had a few friends of ours do a performance of I Can't Help Falling in Love
So
by Elvis
beautiful.
Presley,
Yeah.
but we swapped out the word falling in love for building a love. And that was our mission for our marriage, was to build something. I understand you way more than I did in the past. I feel more connected to you, and I want to serve you and love you every day more than I ever have before.
In the same vein, I know myself more than I ever have before. And I don't mean that in a selfish way, but I heard once a pastor at Regent University say that marriage is like holding up a full-length mirror to who you actually are. And when you look in that mirror, you're going to see all of your sin. You're going to see all of your faults, all of your downfalls. And I did, and I still do. Like, there's so much that I have to work
Same.
on and improve.
Yep.
But
Marriage is for holiness, not for happiness.
yes, it is for holiness. And through our marriage, I've learned so much about how much more I need to grow and how much more I need to cling to the Lord and how much more I need to lay down my life for my husband. So not only do you know me better and I know you better, but I also know myself better in a way that is much more glorifying to God as well, because now I can better work through my problems and I can better communicate with you and I can better work with you to glorify God.
Yeah. And what we're going to be doing in this podcast series is we're going to be breaking down the biggest lessons that we learned in our marriage and are continuing to learn. And so we hope that you would join us in future episodes to hear some of those things, the mistakes that we made and the things that we sometimes occasionally did right, as well as what the Lord has been doing in our relationship. And again, our hope for this is that it helps at least one person out there who maybe relates to one piece of our story and can take what we learned and what the Lord did as hope for you, that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and that your love story is not up to fate or falling in love or soulmates or compatibility. Your love story is something that you can write. It is something that you can build. So we hope to see you in the future episodes. We'll be breaking down specific things in detail, but that is it for our story. So, yeah, we'll see you on the next episode. Bye.